In today's video, which is sponsored by Squarespace, we're going to take a look at how to make a more realistic camera lens in Blender. Now, if you saw my cell phone tutorial, we did make a lens there and it was pretty bad. It got the job done for a quick shot, but was not very realistic at all. But flash forward to a couple months ago, and I was working on a freelance project where I was rendering this security camera, and I knew my old trickery was not going to cut it, so reached out to some of the rendering pros on the Minor Details Industrial Design Discord and got some extra tips. And the biggest tip was basically that you gotta have realistic, good kind of lens geometry if you want things to be looking right. So that's going to be the direction we take in this particular video. Now, before we get started, I wanted to say that what we're trying to make here is essentially just something that looks cool, even though we're going to be using some realistic references, and I did way too much research on lenses leading up to this. We're really not going for scientific accuracy here, but more so just something that looks cool. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, so I'm in my pretty basic default Blender scene here. I'm gonna press A to select everything, X to delete it, and then I want to add in my reference image. I'll try to have a link to this in the description. I'll probably post it on Patreon for free, but also I will just make it full screen here so you can screenshot it. So Shift A image, background image, and then I'll navigate to where I have that saved. And the lens we're going to be referencing is a Zeiss 21mm fisheye lens. I tried a few different lenses, but really turns out that the fisheye lens just looked a lot cooler. I tried some other like Leica lenses and stuff like that, but yeah, the fisheye just looked way cooler. So that's the one we're going to be using. But of course, in a real client scenario, you'd probably know exactly what lens to be using. Now I'm just going to turn the opacity down this a little bit. So yeah, enough about the lenses. I will make a note now. We're going to be, sort of in copying this lens structure here. We're being somewhat scientific, I understand, but at the same time, at the end of the day, we just want it to look cool. We're not worried about doing things too accurately. But anyways, enough about that. At the end of the, so what we did in not enough about that. What we did in my self-found tutorial was super basic, just not at all based in anything real. And what we're doing here is a little bit more real, but not too much. But okay, now actually enough about that. So we're basically going to be modeling all these things. And the way we're going to be doing it is by just sort of tracing these shapes here. So I just, basically added in a plane with one vertex. I deleted the other ones, and then I'm just pressing E, and I'm just going to kind of trace this shape. Now what we're going to be actually doing to make this work, I'll just show you real quick, is adding in a screw modifier, having that go the right direction, and then we'll be applying that modifier, and then we'll add a subdivision surface, and then we'll be doing some creasing so that certain parts remain sharp, and we'll turn on some auto smoothing, we'll turn up our subdivisions, and that's basically how we're making the lens here. So just because it builds character, I'm going to delete that, press A, Shift A, add in a plane, rotate that on the x-axis, delete all the vertices, and let's do it again. Okay, so once again, got your vertex, E to extrude it, and then just kind of tracing out the shape here. Now we'll want to be a little bit more accurate with the curves of these ones in the front. This is the front, and because those are most visible, we don't need to be as accurate here in the back, but be as accurate as you want, because the more accurate you are, the better these reflections and stuff are probably going to look. So I'm just pressing E and moving these down. Now I'll make a note right here that you'll want all these to be in line with the x-axis so that when we do our screw modifier, they all are going perfectly right about the center. But I'll show you how we can handle that at the end once we've got these all traced out. So let's go ahead and trace them out. So Shift D and just E to extrude. You can hold Shift to kind of make a more fine-tuned placement there. Now don't worry about getting all the details. Yeah, just kind of something like this. Now I think I'm gonna go ahead and put this into a little bit of a time-lapse mode, and you can kind of watch what I'm doing. Boom, boom, ba, ba, da, ba, da. This is the music that goes with the Derek time-lapse. It doesn't take very long because it's a time-lapse, and the whole song doesn't rhyme a whole lot because it's a time-lapse. There's just a little bit longer left in this time-lapse. Okay, so got those all traced. Didn't take me too long. Hopefully it didn't take you too long. But once those are all traced like that, now let's just say for a second that you've completely had it with 3D rendering and animation, and you want to go back to your old faithful profession of photography, but you need money stat. Well, you're going to need a website, and the easiest way to get a super professional site up and running is with Squarespace. With Squarespace, you can build an extremely legit website that showcases all your best stock photography and maybe even set up a little store with some of those sweet lenses you decided to start manufacturing, because that must be easier than 3D rendering them, right? Squarespace is ready and waiting for you to receive 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain when you go to squarespace.com/jerk. Head on over now and get that site alive. Link in description. Let us continue. As I mentioned, since we're using the screw modifier to sort of spin these around, I want to make sure that all these are sitting right on this x-axis, which is where our origin is of the object. So I'm just going to box select everything in the middle there, and then pressing Shift-C to make sure my cursor is in the center, and then period on my keyboard. I can change my pivot point to the 3D cursor. So then I'm just going to press SZ0. And if those were all pretty close, it's not going to throw off kind of the curves and stuff I had, but feel free to make any little adjustments if things did get thrown off. So we've got sort of our half profile there. So what I want to do is add in that screw modifier and make that go on the x-axis. Depending on how you did your model, it might be one or the other, but for me, it's going to be the x-axis. And then we also want to do this merge option. So what that's going to do is, basically, so this goes around 360 degrees, a little Pac-Man there. When it comes around, you want it to merge those vertices. So the merge option will make sure that it does that, so that when you add in your subdivision surface, you don't have doubles. But since we're going to be doing a destructive process here, applying this modifier, I'm going to press Shift-D and just move this into a new collection called the trash collection. M is the thing to move to a collection, and I'm going to disable that. So in case we needed to go back and make any adjustments before the screw modifier, we could do that. But with my mouse hovering over here, I'm going to press Control-A and apply the screw modifier. And then I'm going to apply a subdivision surface modifier, and we can set that to about 2 levels. When we render this, we might want to add more, but right now I'm going to just leave these both at 2. Now, I don't know if this would look totally proper, but just to be more accurate, I want to sharpen up the parts that were sharp in our reference. And the way I'm going to do that is by going into my edge select mode up here, or pressing 2 on the top of your keyboard. I just want to select sort of the edges that should be sharp. So just going through and Alt and left clicking to select those, just kind of looking at my reference image here. This is a semi-tedious process. There's probably a better way to do this, but hey, this is the way we're doing it. It doesn't take too long, right? Builds character. So just selecting the parts I want to be sharp, and yes, that's sharp. So then let's just turn our crease all the way up, and then with those still selected, I'm going to press Control-E and mark those sharp. And then I would want to make sure this is shaded smooth, but then turn on my auto smooth option so those get nice and sharp. So let's just look in our side view here. It looks like we missed a couple spots. So this one, crease up. Was that it? Was it just that one? Oh, and then we've got a couple other little spots here. This one, crease up. How we looking? Did we get them all? I think we got them all. Got this little guy here. Crease up. Control-E, mark sharp. Okay. I think that looks pretty good. Again, do whatever lens structure you want, but this fisheye one really ends up looking pretty sweet. So with that all together, I'm going to take my reference image and just move it into the trash collection, which is disabled, so it's out of the way. And yeah, we've got sort of our lens stack here. Now, the next thing that I'd like to do is just go ahead and start adding in some materials and lighting. So this is how I usually like to set up my interface for that. Just kind of dragging out a few windows. This one I'll make into a shader editor, and then this one I'll leave as a 3D viewport, but switch it into the rendered mode, and then I'll also turn off my overlays. Now for the lighting, you can do sort of whatever you want, but I'm going to start off by just adding in an HDRI. So the way we'll do that is just click that little color dot, and then change this to an environment texture, and it'll turn pink, indicating that it does not have a texture, but we have a texture. I'm going to use this pink sunrise.exr file from Polyhaven, HDRI Haven, whatever they're calling themselves these days. This is the same one we used in my last tutorial where we made that truck animation, but loading that in, you can bring up the strength on it just a little bit while we're doing this work. And yeah, we've got sort of lighting. We'll add in a few more lights to get some good reflections, but this is a good place to start. So what I want to do is with these lenses selected, let's add a new material. Let's call it lens, L-E-N-S. And so what do we want to do? We want to make it transmissive. Of course, you can see through lenses. They transmit light. That's cool. Let's make it not so rough, aka shiny, bringing the roughness down. Now some of the shading looks a little bit funky here, and that could just be the way when we were modeling some of the normals got screwed around, but let's press tab to go into edit mode and then shift N with everything selected, and that will recalculate the normals. So now those should all be facing the right way. So this looks good. Now to make sure it's super transparent, let's bring this default value of 0.8 up to a 1. You don't want to go past 1 in this case, but well, you can go past 1 if you want to, but probably want that just at 1 so it's not like multiplying light is kind of what that does. But that's a topic for another day. We did talk about that in my shoe material tutorial. But these lenses look pretty good. Next thing I want to do is just add like a little bit of like a coating to them. And again, not getting into the science here, but some of those coatings are kind of like a metallic look to it. But instead of just turning up this metallic value, I want to actually like add in another shader and just mix them together. But before I do that, let's just, well, actually we can just, should we do that? Let me just show you one thing real quick. Let's turn this metallic up to 1 just for demonstration purposes, because I want to show you this little spot right here. That is not a hole in our mesh, but what that is the light bouncing back and forth so many times that Blender stops calculating it. But we do have control over that. If you really want realistic reflections and stuff, especially for this example where we've got light kind of going crazy through itself, then you're going to want to turn these light paths higher than they are now. Now, I would recommend, if your computer can handle it, just turn this to full global illumination. Then you won't have to worry about it. So you can see this is going to allow itself to bounce back and forth a lot more times than default. I think, it's still limited. In real life, it would go infinitely, but, you got to stop somewhere when you're doing the calculations on your computer. But just turning this to full global illumination is going to get rid of any bad issues you might have there. So let's turn this metallic back off, because when metallic is on, it will basically remove our transmission. And speaking of transmission, the index of refraction, I did way too much research on lenses and stuff, but they do change. Like, so in an actual camera lens, different parts might have a different index of refraction. But I'm just going to set it to like a 1.5. I think is a good like middle ground for this type of a glass. So, but you can use that index of refraction to sort of, direct the look of kind of what you're going for. But something like a 1.5 I think is relatively realistic. Now back to that coatings thing. I'm going to add in another principled shader and make it metallic. Actually, you know what we can do? I think we can just use a glossy. So let's just plug this glossy in here. Take a look at that. So glossy is basically, before the principled shader existed, just adding in a glossy shader would essentially be a glass. And what is this weird shading going on over here? Oh wait, I think this is supposed to be creased. Mark sharp. Sorry, that was driving me crazy. Okay, anyways, so metallic is basically just glossy with roughness 0. So we'll say like that's our coating. We want to mix between these two. So I'm going to press Shift A and add in a shader. We'll do a mix shader. This may or may not be the same thing as just adding in a little metallic here, but it makes me feel better to not do that. So I want this to mostly be the first shader. So I'm going to bring this down to like a 0.08 or something. But now it just kind of looks like we've got a little bit of a coating on there. And then one thing that's cool that we can do is use the color of this glossy to sort of control the filtered color of that. Now, different filters would be different colors to filter different types of lights. Again, not getting into the science here, but one way to make our lenses look a little bit cooler is to sort of have different filters on different ones. So the way I'm going to do that is, let's just name this lens 1. Let's add in a new material, and we'll make that lens 1, but hit this little new material button, call it lens 2, and then let's make this one like a blue or something like that, or a green, I don't know, whatever you want. And then I'm just going to select a few of the lenses here. So L for lens, just kidding, L I think is for like island or linked. I'm just going to select a few of them and then assign lens 2 to those. So now we just have sort of 2 different colors of lenses, and maybe we want to make the other one I don't know. So the purple is looking a little extreme. Maybe we want that one to be like a magenta, or sorry, like a blue that's like super bright, maybe not so saturated. And maybe the other one we have be like, maybe like a green. We're going to be getting a little bit of magenta from this sky, but yeah, well, we can tweak these later, but I think that's going to be cool once we start putting our housing around this. So speaking of that housing, let's go ahead and add the housing in. So the way I'm going to do the housing, we could do it the same way we did before with like the screw method, but I think I'm just going to press Shift A, add in a circle. The default 32 should be fine there for the number of vertices. I'm going to do RY 90, and then let's just kind of move this over again because we're not looking at it. And then in my front view here, I'm just going to, I basically need to make like a housing. Oh, let's change our pivot point period on our keyboard, change that back to median point. And I'm just going to start this sort of a little bit past there. Let's just E to extrude it. And then we kind of just need to keep going around here and just sort of follow the shape of our lenses. So we just kind of scale this in, extrude this out, extrude this, scale it. By the way, so that I'm going on the x-axis, I'm pressing E, and then if I press my middle mouse button down, it'll constrain it to an axis. So I'm not being super accurate here. Now, the main thing is you just do not want any light to be leaking in from the sides. But the way we're going to really do that is by moving this out. Let's press F to make this a face, and then I to inset it, just so there's a little extra geometry, because we are going to subdivide this. So let's add in a subdivision surface, but so that everything doesn't get totally smoothed out, I think I might want to add in maybe a bevel modifier. Is that going to be the way to do that? Or maybe just creasing things again. Let's add in a bevel modifier, and let's put that before the subdivision. And let's just bring this angle way down. So it's basically beveling everything except for the around the circle. So that's probably like, I think with 32 vertices, it's like a 12.5 degrees. Is what the angle is between those. As soon as I drop that, I think it's something like that. So if we set that to 15 degrees, it should basically get everything. Or you could just crease it too. I don't know. It's really not too important right there. Let's bring this whole thing around so that this becomes like an enclosed structure. So let's press E and extrude this out. S to scale that. Oh, I think we just need to like add more bevel segments. Yeah. Let's make 3 so it's like really sharp and make this tiny. Okay, now we've got a better look. Now, it does look cool to kind of add sort of this little bit of like a hood. I'm not going to be too good with the terminology here, but there's these things, those little jagged things that happen. I want to add those in. So let's just press Ctrl R, add in a couple edge loops, and then let's select them both. And then I'm going to do Ctrl B to bevel them. And then with one of them selected, I'll just kind of like scale it. Maybe I'll scale this one in a little bit. I think these help like reduce the light that gets reflected in the lens from the edge. I don't know. Don't lie, you know you've seen those things on cameras. We don't need to know what they're called. Photography people, please educate us below. Now I want to leave a nice little spot where I can put my cool text around the outside. So maybe that's going to go like right there or something. And I might actually add in another just like little tiny like cover lens, like a protective thing. So let's say that goes like right in that little notch right there. And if we need to, we can like scale this all down on the x-axis so that doesn't stick out so far. Once again, going for looks here, not scientific accuracy. But let's go ahead now and E, scale this out a little bit, and then E and just bring this all the way back. Let's do F to make that a face, I to inset it, just so we've got a little more geometry. And we should basically have like our camera lens thing. I mean, that looks pretty sick, not gonna lie, that looks pretty sweet. Now I just might, you could either rotate the HDRI, or because I usually like the y-axis to be sort of like looking forward, I'm just gonna rotate this whole thing so that it's looking out into our beautiful pink sunrise. Now, while we're doing this, let's just what do we want to do now? I guess we should probably give this some materials. So I want to shade that smooth. Let's add in a few materials. So new material, I'm going to call this lens housing. And that's going to be, let's call that the outside. Sort of like a, I don't know, those lenses, they've kind of got like a powder coated metal look, but they're like really dark. So I'm going to turn the metallic up. It's going to be like a black metal, like a super dark metal for the outside. Just because it's kind of cool, you know. Maybe it's a little bit shiny like that. You could add a little like roughness to it if you wanted to add in a bump, which this is not really a material tutorial, but let's just say we wanted to add in a little bit of a noise texture, add in a vector bump. Just give this a little bit of bumpiness. If you want to learn more about materials, definitely check out my shoe materials tutorial, because that's going to be way better for that type of thing. No, not generate. Let's do object. And then, you know, they have like that, I don't know what that's called. It's just, you see it on the outside of it's like a little speckly look, acid etch or something. I'll turn the strength on it down, the distance pretty low, just so we've got, you know, a little bit of a texture there. I think looks cool. Yeah, let's leave that at that. Now it would be a good idea at this point probably to think about what angle you want to be filming your camera lens from, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to add in a camera control numpad 0, so I'm looking through that, and then shift tilde. Let's just find sort of our angle here that we want to look at, maybe something like that. Because, you know, when you're setting up your lighting, you want to be like art directing your reflections and stuff a little bit more at this point. Which, speaking of those reflections, maybe we just add in sort of step 1 of directing the lighting here. Let's add in a light. I'll just do a spotlight, and then I'll do RX90, just so this is looking straight ahead. And this is just going to create sort of a nice little, now let's turn the power on it up a lot. And the radius we can bring up. This is just giving us sort of this little reflection here. You know, you can kind of move it off to the side, maybe move it down a little bit, just so that when we're moving around our lens, we get sort of a nice reflection happening there where you can see all the different layers that we put all that work into. But yeah, the lighting obviously is going to affect how good this lens looks, and HDRI is a super quick way to get us most of the way there. But you might want to add in some other lights and stuff like that. But really, this is looking pretty good. Now, I might add in another material to this lens housing. So let's do new, and let's just do a fully new material, and we'll call this lens inner. Now, I want to assign that to the inner portion of the lens, as you might have assumed. So I'm just going to select something on the inside there. That looks good. And then Control+ to grow my selection, just until I get all the way to the sort of outermost part there, maybe all the way to right. And I want to assign that material to that, so that we now have 2 materials. Now we still want this to be black, but instead of it being that sort of metallic black, I just want this to be a super rough, super dark black, like you would see on an actual camera, just so we've got a little bit of difference in the materials there. I think that looks nice. And also because this is where I want to add in the dark details. So like right here, what if we want to write hyperduper 3.0, dark.com, that type of thing? That's going to be a great place to put it. Let's, if you have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, you can press Control T with this selected, and that'll add in the mapping nodes to add in an image texture. If you don't have the Node Wrangler add-on, well, you should have it. You should have to find these yourself. Sorry. I want to add in an image. Now the image I'm going to use is one that I made specifically for this. I think I put that in my 3D folder, hyperduper1.jpg. That's going to be the image texture. If we look at what that is, it's basically just this. If you want to copy it, go for it. But yeah, it's literally just an image with some text on it. And I'm going to wrap this around the outside. So feel free to, here, I'll move my mouse for you. Screenshot that if you want to use it. Otherwise, make your own. You know, put your own URL, your company, your Fiverr link where you're going to make a lot more money off this design than I ever will. But yes, the choice is yours. Now, so that I can see where that texture gets applied, I'm going to click this button, texture. And right now it does not appear to be applied anywhere. So I'm going to select everything by pressing A, and then U, Smart UV Project, which now it will be applied in some places, but I don't want it to be applied really anywhere on most of this thing. So I'm just going to move this into a white area. This is the classic sticker sheet method I have described before. But let's just select a ring there. And then as long as one of the quads is kind of like lit up like that, you can do U and then follow active quads, and whatever the default length average works fine. And that will sort of unwrap a ring in a more straight format. Now, when you do that, it's like still kind of stretched a little weird. So the way that I fix that, which is probably very incorrect, is to just basically select this top thing and just scale that out until everything's looking a little bit more like a rectangle. That looks great. Rotate that, straighten it out, and then just kind of scale this whole bad boy up. My computer's cranking over there. By the way, I didn't mention it, but you want to be working in cycles to make this look really good. You could probably do something halfway decent in Eevee, but really cycles is going to be the way to go. So that worked. I've got a Dirk.com over there. I like that. Now I'll just maybe select like this area, maybe put the, this information, 21 millimeter f 2.8, whatever the heck that means. I'm just kidding. Sorry, photography people. Okay, so I've got an issue. Those are like not connected, so I'm just gonna move that one out. Let's just find another area where they are connected. Maybe that's where the Hyperduper 3.0, 3.2 goes. Oops, gotta get this too. Oh geez, come on. Okay, so I want this all the way over to this. This is sort of a janky way of doing this, but just kind of placing that where my text is until I've got some details going around the outside. And I think that looks good. You see that on cameras from time to time. They kind of got the information around the outside. Don't usually have a Dirk.com on them, I don't think, but let's get these colors going back the right way. You could just add in an invert because I want to go from black and white to white and black, but I'm going to add in a converter color ramp and then just flip the colors around so that we have our little details on the inside there. I think looks pretty sweet. Now, what was the other thing? I think I wanted to add in a little just a lens thing that goes on the outside. So I'm just going to, let's actually just add in a circle RX90 F to make it a face, and then just bring this up to the front. And just so that it's barely kissing the edge there, let's actually make sure we add in a subdivision surface to this so that that's nice and round. And then let's inset this a tad. Oops, I pressed spacebar to play. And then maybe, you could actually give that a little bit of bulbousness to it if you wanted, maybe just a tad. This is going to be just sort of a protective portion of the lens, like not an actual lens itself. So let's shade that smooth. And then I'm going to add in a little bit of a solidify to that, just so that it has some thickness and just a really little bit. And then let's turn on our auto smooth. Again, that's going to be down here if you don't have it as a quick favorite. And I'm going to add a new material. I'm just going to call that lens cover. Lens cover. And that we're going to do transmission 1, roughness 0. And for this one, so that we can really see through it, well, for one, let's make sure this is purely white. Yes. And I'm getting a little bit of funky shading there. I need to add in, oh no, I think that's just the rock reflection. You would want this to be very high poly so that it's not going to distort your reflections. Something like that looks good. Which really, I didn't talk about it too much, but when you just fill a face like that, it creates what's called like a triangle fan, which can give you a little bit of distortion. I think if you model your lenses a little bit differently with less pinching in the middle, you can avoid that. But it's a little bit more complicated, the geometry for that. But we can have a hearty discussion about that in the comments. But yeah, now we've got this really nice, just kind of glassy edge. Now for this one, so that it's super transparent, you might want to turn the index of refraction down to like, almost a 1. 1 would be like totally transparent. But just a little over 1 will give you a little hint of a reflection on the outside without messing up what you're seeing on the inside. But this is all looking great. I think maybe, this whole front area feels a little bit big. So I'm just going to S and Y to scale that down. We're just going to probably distort my text a little bit. That's all right. I'm not too worried about it. And then maybe this comes back a tad, just so we can see more of our lens. Okay. That looks cool. I like that. Now, what else do we want to do? I want to show you how we could add in a little bit of like a hood to this. It's just kind of another cool little detail just to make this look a little bit more exciting. Adding in a circle there, lots of circles in this tutorial. And let's just E to extrude, bring this out to maybe right there. And then I just want to select maybe like the top and bottom vertices and the side vertices. And then I'm going to turn on my proportional editing. And then let's just check like a, I don't know, sharp? No, not sharp. Let's just leave it at the default smooth. And I'm just going to kind of bring some parts of this out so that we've got like a little hood shape. Now, it's going to need a little bit of art direction. Now, one thing I noticed is the ones on the side don't always seem to come out as much. So like, let's just kind of flatten that out for one and sort of like bring it in somewhere like that. And then these ones, let's also sort of flatten this so it's not so pointy, something like that. And then maybe these, just let's turn off proportional editing. Maybe that just gets like a little bit more flattened out. Play with the shape as much as you want there, but something like that I think looks fine. You can scale it and stuff as needed. Let's give this the lens housing material. And then let's also, okay, subdivide it to smooth everything out. That's going to be step one. Then I want to solidify it to give it a little bit of thickness. And then you could either subdivide it again, or I think what I'm going to do is just add in a bevel and just make that pretty small, just to kind of round off those edges a little bit. And let's make sure this whole thing is shaded smooth, and we have our auto smooth option enabled. And yeah, now we have just sort of a little bit of a, like a hood. You know, make this go back as far as you want, whatever you think looks good. You know, maybe this actually like flares out a little bit. That's probably does something bad for the lights, but Derek's not a photographer. He doesn't know about that. My job is taking the jobs away from photographers. I'm just kidding. I love photographers, but unfortunately, a lot of times when people are hiring me, it's because they're not hiring a photographer, which that's what I do for a living, by the way, guys. You always ask, do you make money with Blender? This is what I do. I do this. I do 3D render. Okay, I'm going to stop messing with this so much. All right, that looks cool. Maybe that was a little extreme. We've got our little hood on there. That looks fancy. The hood is also nice too, because then you get sort of these darker reflections kind of in there. Now, as far as reflections go, maybe the last thing we'd want to do is add in another light. Let's just add in an area light. We could make it a rectangle, just so it's kind of stretching along the whole thing there. Maybe bring it forward. Turn up the power on it, just so we've got a nice, you know, detail kind of gracing the top of our hood. And then maybe, you know, you add in like another one so you get some reflection on the bottom there. Just kind of figuring this shot out. You know, it looks kind of nice to have that come in a tad there. That looks good. You could really make it pop by adding in some color management. You can turn on very high contrast. Oh yeah, looking pretty good. Now for mine, last little wrap up details. Well, we'll probably do a couple details, but for one, this power is looking a little extreme. I'm gonna turn that down. You could also like, you know, you could like add some color to this. Just start getting a real dynamic looking render. You know, maybe underneath you get sort of a bluish purple. Oh yeah, that's looking very photographer-ish. And you know, this is when you would want to go in and adjust your lens colors. Maybe you don't like the green, maybe you want more of like a red look for that one. Maybe you want this one to be an even stronger blue. Or maybe you want to leave this one as green. I don't know, it's just looking super trippy. You could even go into your world settings and add in a little bit of hue saturation to your world. Now this is going to start getting extremely unrealistic, but just add in a little saturation. All right, we're going. This is why they hire photographers, not me. It's because this is getting way too insane. But yeah, that looks cool. Now, you could render this on like a transparent background and add in black at the end, or you could just pull a Derek and just scale up a big plane here, rotate it so that it's like making a backdrop, but you don't have to go into Photoshop after the fact. This is a very lazy way of hiding the HDRI. But I like it. And, then I would just go in and add in my lens housing material. And, maybe so that it didn't get so much reflection, just kind of pull this in, delete that face, subdivide the whole thing, shade it smooth. I've just sort of made a little vignette there. That looks pretty darn good, if you ask me. But you're asking me, not a photographer, so what do I know? That looks cool. Just because I did it, I might as well show you. So in my little one I posted on Instagram, I made like a little housing to kind of act like this is like a security camera or something. I just did that by adding in a cube, giving it some thickness, something like that. Bring that back, just to make this look like it's a device or something, not just a random thing, which is what it is. You could give this the same material. Okay, we're getting into the extra credit here, but that's about it. That is a very cool looking lens. You would just want to spend some time moving your lights around, getting them to look right. If you wanted to add a little animation like I did, like let's say you just want a 5-second animation at 30 frames per second. So, pick your end frame. Something like this maybe would be what you want to show. Oh, I forgot. The whole point of adding this was that we can just parent it to the camera. And now when I go in here, that'll kind of move with me. Just don't go too far back because then it'll go through it. Okay, so yeah, I was just going to pick kind of a cool end frame here. Maybe something like that. And you could even add in some depth of field. But I won't show you how to do that because you know how to do that, right? Just put that something like that. I insert keyframes for location and rotation. And then at frame 0, maybe you're coming in like this. Sort of got a nice reveal there. Something like that. Insert keyframes. And then you could just make all these linear so that you've got sort of this nice cinematic shot. Add a render border. And you're in great shape. That's a pretty realistic looking lens, I think. Well, okay, no, I gotta backtrack. It's a cool looking lens. I am not going to comment on how realistic it is. We did use an actual lens, but when you get into the materials and the coatings and all these crazy colors and stuff, that's where it's potentially less realistic, but I like it. I think it looks cool. You do whatever you want till you think it looks cool. But yeah, that's the gist of it. Making a realistic lens. Start with some realistic geometry. Crank up your sample settings. Make it look really nice. You can use denoising so this doesn't take so long to render, but yeah, you're still going to need a fair amount of samples to make that look decent. Probably not the default. I think when I rendered my sample, I might have used like 800 or something with denoising. Make sure you shade everything smooth. It's supposed to be smooth. The first time I did this, I accidentally made this flat, which when you have so much geometry, you can't really tell. But you sure can tell when it comes to the reflection. So make sure what's supposed to be smooth is smooth and vice versa. This is a really fun one. I hope you all enjoyed. Thanks everyone in the past who had helped me out with making my lenses look more realistic on an actual client project I was working on. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks for being here. Like and subscribe. I'll have the file that I posted on Instagram, which is sort of the polished version. I'll put that on my Patreon. So if you're a subscriber over there, you can have that, play around, look at what I did maybe a little differently from the tutorial. But anyways, I haven't saved yet. Make sure you save. We'll call this tutorial 2. Save it. Have a good day. Tag me on Instagram with your lenses. I really want to see kind of what you're doing, where you're putting your lenses, maybe other lens diagrams you followed, what the look ended up looking like. But yeah, thanks for being here. I love you so much, and I'll see you next time.